Do they actually check the permit that's on the post? Because that's annoying the residents more than anything right now, the fact that they still have a renovation permit on the post, yet they've built a new house there.
Through the mayor to Councillor Sanderson, I'll go back and check and see, and ensure that we have the correct permit posted at that site.
Okay. And also, you are gonna be checking in about this tax scenario, are you? You know, maybe there's some of these people that need to be paying the GST after the fact.
Yeah, through
Or HST, sorry.
we will. I think we were given direction when we come back on the 25th to look at the issue of the demolition permit and how we should tighten up or could possibly tighten up that process to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay, thank you.
I have the motion from Councillor Moore and Councillor Gibson, I-8-2, it's as printed, it's unamended. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Okay, Council, we're now moving to J1. J1 is minutes of committee. I understand that Brian Johnston has requested to delegate on item G1, which is the matter of e-bingo, and he is here, but we need to have a... Okay, so I need a motion. To e-bingo? Okay, but we have to reopen to add a delegation, so could I have a motion to reopen, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Dillon, that we reopen the agenda to allow a delegation? All those in favor? That's carried. Brian Johnston is now the delegation, and the delegation we would take first. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council, CAO, senior staff. In regards to the e-bingo that was discussed at Committee of Council last week, the consensus was, and it was carried, that we, the City of Brampton, would be entering into a contract with the province of Ontario. And that there would be no changes made to that contract. It's something that needed to be accepted in whole. And I wanted to speak to it and then ask a question, because I am very, very concerned. First of all, I want to say I have no problem whatsoever with e-bingo. And it's a necessity in order to be able to keep what has become the normal of contributing money to the 29 charities that are involved with bingo at Rutherford at the present time. I do have a genuine concern that was expressed at the committee council meeting, that because of the way the contract is written, you're going to sign away the next 16 years to the province of Ontario, where this municipality will have absolutely no control over what takes place with regards to the e-bingo and what it would allow the provincial government, which in my mind is unstable and facing a $12 billion deficit. One of the ways to recover that money would be to go to the poker machines and other things that will take place, especially if all the slots and everything are taken out of Woodbine Racetrack. And I just wanted to make it known from my personal standpoint, and I know about gambling, okay, because I've been put in situations where I needed to take control of my own personal habits, and they were the slot machines. And it's infathomable when you're there playing, dropping your nickels in or your quarters in, playing the machine, you're having a good time, but the next thing you know, the $800 you had in the bank's gone. And you know, you got rent to pay. And then you face a situation of eviction. And then you're homeless. Been there, done that, don't want it again. So, if anything else, the question I want to ask this council, if they so desire to pass the report that was presented at Committee of Council where it was carried, that this city council write a letter to the new premier of the province of Ontario expressing the concerns that have been brought forward to what the province has a right to do with as they see fit. And that's the fact that they could turn around and they could put gambling machines in there, whether it be poker or Lucky Sevens or whatever, in order to raise money. So if it's gonna be passed and we're gonna sign the contract and lose for 16 years, any form of control over what's gonna take place, let it be known up front exactly the concerns that we have. And the fact is, the gun's been held to our head to sign it the way it is, or we don't get it. Brampton cannot afford not to have bingo in place. It's that simple. That's the way that it's gonna have to go to have any chance to exist here. And that I can appreciate because they do wonderful work. Absolutely wonderful work. And that's all I got to say, and anybody has a question, ask it. I'll be happy to tell you my views on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I understand the staff briefing was very clear that the parameters of the legislation does not give council a chance to opt in and out of various elements of the e-bingo, and I believe that by allowing the Rotary to continue with e-bingo at their own hall, the discussion is good to have with them, because they would ultimately be in charge of whether they want to introduce that into the hall. So I think we should have a follow-up conversation and make sure the local Rotary, who's here to do all the right things, their intention, they made clear, was for e-bingo. They weren't looking at any of the other elements, but I take your advice, and perhaps we could have a further conversation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Callahan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry, we're in J1. Who's Councillor Moore? You should be doing this. We're in committee of, okay, I'm going to put myself down too, because I have an item to speak to. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, you have before you the recommendations from Committee of Council last week. I have Councillor Callahan. Did we move proceed with the delegation, Madam Mayor?
We can have a motion to receive the delegation right now. Why don't we do that, Councillor Moore and Councillor Gibson? 1, 2, all in favor of receiving the delegation? Thank you.
Thank you. First speaker is Councillor Callahan. You're speaking on e-bingo?
Yes, I am. Am I
You're on.
due to go?
You're on deck.
All right, and Mr. Johnson raises a lot of the issues that I raised on the last occasion and was reported recently in The Guardian. And I guess it'd be twixt and between. Rotary does a lot of good things with the money they get from bingo. And e-bingo would be less than the paper stuff where you gotta have a dabber to follow it. But the thing that really concerned me, and I emphasize, is the province is in a pickle. They're clearly signaling to municipalities that they're offering this opportunity to them to take over e-bingo. I suggest there's even greater takeover than that, which is going to take place. They refer in the paper to 30 communities they've gone to. Now, they couldn't possibly go to 30 communities and open up a horse track with slot machines filled in there. But because they've decided they want to get rid of the slots at Woodbine and other places like that, they are in fact prepared to cut a deal for e-bingo. But the kicker in here is that the province is not going to say whether or not they'll put anything more into these e-bingo halls than just e-bingo. And that tells me that I suspect what's happening is what they're going to do is move all of the slot machines out of, they've already said they're going to do that, out of the racetracks. And this would result in an unbelievable number of people who would be out of work. And of course, they don't want to be the cause of these people losing their work, so they're trying to figure out a way to spread it around through municipal offers that they've made. And I'm very suspect of it, and particularly if we sign on, we're signed on for 16 years, and let's say they decide to put in VLTs or they decide to put in God knows what else, how do we stop them? We've got no ability to stop them. They're the only ones that can cancel the contract. So we are subject to this removal or of the slots and anything that comes from it down into our community with no ability to be able to get out of that trap. I have very real concerns. I think their major motive is that they want to, as I've said, is to simply be able to move these slots down into local communities such as ours, such as Mississauga, many, many others, and that way they can move the employees too. They don't have to face the possibility of killing all those jobs, and then go back to having these racetracks just racetracks. And I thought about this the whole time after I'd spoken to it. I thought there's got to be a hitch here. And the one hitch that's very significant, and one that I think we should negotiate with them, is that if we decide to take on e-bingo, which I think it would be a good thing, then we should be in a position where any contract that we entered into with the province with reference to that particular use would be subject to some type of discussion between the province and the municipality should the thing turn out to be what I've just said it was, or should it be one that's not desirable for the city of Brampton. I remember back 20 years ago, we had the opportunity to have a casino here in Brampton, and it was turned down almost 100%. And now we're just sort of opening the crack in the door, and bingo is enjoyed by seniors particularly, but we're now opening up the opportunity that the seniors and people on welfare may very well be able to much in an easier fashion, would be able to just slide down and lose all their money in one day and then not have the check at the end of the month. And that really concerns me. So, Madam Mayor, quite right, we don't have the ability under this contract, if we sign it, to opt out. But on the other side of the coin, I think it's somewhat unbelievable that we would enter into a contract with the province where they are the only ones that can cut the deal to get out of it, and they are also the only one, and they are also the only ones that can put in any type of game they want into that casino. And if it turns out to the detriment of the city, so what? We can't get out of it unless we can dig our way out in some other fashion. But as our counsel told us on the last occasion, he confirmed what I said, that if you've got a contract in writing, you cannot rely on any statements that are made outside that writing. So you're stuck. You've got a jackpot is what you're at. And I think it's important. I know we passed it. I know that my colleague here from the regional council is in favor of it, as many others are, because Rotary can make a lot of money on this. But at the end of the day, I don't want to see what I've just predicted happening. And I think it's as plain as the snow on the ground that this is going to happen, because otherwise why would they put in a clause saying that we can put anything in there we like, we're not going to do it, we're not going to tell you what it is, but later on we'll tell you. Well, I don't like those kind of contracts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. Mayor Fennell.
I'm discussing a different item on the agenda, so if that one's complete, I'll move to the next item.
I don't see any more speakers on that.
Thank you, Council. I wanted to bring up a topic that's here on the committee agenda that's moving through. It's on page 7 of 18. The subject is the ward boundaries, and our recommendation includes the language that the Regional Representation Task Force consider the question of the 6th Regional Councillor from among, I'm not sure why we would ask the Region Appeal Councillors to weigh in on how to do that. I would like to separate that and vote against it, but I have a different item that should there be this Regional Representation Task Force, if I could digress for a moment. Council, back in 2005, we had a very animated and public debate about council configuration. You'll recall this council is on record of dividing into 10 wards, and all 10 wards, all 10 councillors being at the region. You'll recall that that was the position of this council. You'll recall that was a position of more than 3 busloads of citizens who went with us and the media everyone said this was the right solution for Brampton, that we be 10 wards, we right-sized, and all members be represented. I know in the early days, this year, there was some discussion. Many councillors approached me and said, why aren't we reapproaching all of Brampton going to the region? And my answer was, really, I don't think the residents want us to be distracted from important city business, nor do I believe there's an appetite. So the evolution is we're where we are today, move the boundaries and set up a regional committee. Well, something's changed. Something's changed, and I would like to bring that forward. At the time, and I have the motions here from 2005, and it was unanimous by this council, we supported the Honourable Justice Adams, who recommended, you'll remember, the provincially paid a negotiation, mediation with the Honourable Justice Adams, and his recommendation, paid for and retained by the former Premier, that was that all Brampton, it was right, all Brampton council should be at the region. And then the province put that report on the shelf and it never happened. Well, we have a new Premier, and I would like to reauthorize, whether it's this council or the Regional Representation Council, to revisit this question. Our MPP, Linda Jeffrey, voted against the Premier and with the residents of this city, so I know that the new Minister of Municipal Affairs, who is in charge of this decision, yes, she is in a position to reintroduce the Justice Adams report to the new Premier and move this appropriate recommendation forward. There is no better time than to be able to do this. At the time it was forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, that's a new person. Linda Jeffrey, MPP, Brampton Centre, now the minister responsible for having that approved. And of course, at the time it was MPP Vic Dillon and MPP Kuldip Kular. Now, all of the Brampton MPPs voted in support of the Justice Adams report. So I would like to either forward this to the regional representation, but we've had a wonderful opportunity, knowing that the new Minister of Municipal Affairs will be anxious to move forward what she so believed in to be the right solution for the region appeal representation, when she took a very strong stand and voted against the Premier of the day. So I think we have an opportunity here, and it was right, it was our conclusion, it was the Justice's conclusion, and I'd like to insert this opportunity into the dialogue that we're having, regardless of how you shift the boundaries. We've never left all of what the Brampton citizens at the time talked about. Why are all Brampton councillors not at the region appeal? I know Councillor Gibson, when I first talked to you about ward boundaries, you said this is what we should be pursuing, and no one here wanted to be distracted with sort of a lost cause. It's not a lost cause. Now you have the minister in place to make the decision. So why not ask that be coming forward? So I've asked the clerk to pull the motions of 2005. We've had town hall meetings. That was the unanimous consent of the speakers, the public, this council. So how we move it forward is the question at this point.
Madam Mayor, as you said, there's two issues here. One is the Justice Adams report, and the other is the boundary lines for each of the 10 wards.
Correct.
I'd like to suggest that perhaps a separate motion that speaks to having the mayor, whatever you want the motion to be, but that that this council support the mayor's approaching the municipal affairs and housing minister to re-engage in the dialogue around the regional representation for Brampton.
If this council believes that's still the proper
I think
outcome,
we've said
then
that all
maybe
along.
we could have a motion to that effect, that is the right solution for Brampton representation, not figuring out who the 6th person is, but the 4 city councillors should also be there, and that Justice Adams' report be brought forward, and we communicate to the Minister of Municipal Affairs that we're looking forward to the provincially paid for mediated report be enacted as soon as possible. Is that fair?
Oh, yes.
You have a list.
I'll go to the list. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Sprovieri?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate the mayor's suggestion, and it would seem that that would be the logical way to go. I believe that this is going to ignite a whole new, another chapter of controversy with our Mississauga people, because I have spoken to, as you know, Madam Mayor, I had a suggestion that's going to be before the committee, our first meeting, that we should try to gain additional regional seats as our population comes close to Mississauga's. I've spoken to several Mississauga councillors whether they would be willing to support this idea, and I got a bit of a mixed reaction from the people I've spoken to. One of the councillors said, you know, I have no problem in doing a phased-in as Brampton reaches our population, that the Brampton council should be sitting on regional councillor on a seat. Another councillor said, well, you know, I believe that we have too many regional councillors around this table as it is. They said the problem is a disparity in with the three municipalities, and the biggest problem is Caledon. You know, have 4 members with only 60,000 residents, and that's where your problem is you should go after some of Caledon's seats, because how can you justify, here we are, just Ward 9 and 10 right now is at 140,000 residents, and Caledon was 60,000, they have 4 and we only have the 1. And the same as the Ward 2 and 6, same situation, and the other wards. So there's a whole different attitude, a mixed feeling on with the Mississauga councillors on how to address this. But you know, from my perspective, I think we should go with a phased approach, that we add more councillors from Brampton as our population grows. I think it would be very hard pressed right now to justify that Brampton would have the same amount of regional councillors around the table when we have 530,000 compared to the 700,000 Mississauga has. I know that, you know, when you talk about numbers, then you say, well, what about Caledon with 60,000 residents and they have 4? Well, really, that's where the problem is. And if we really want to move forward with this initiative that you've suggested, I think that everything should be on the table, and we should go to the province and say, look, guys, we want you to really do a thorough review of the situation we're in at Peel Region and give us a fair solution. Because the way it is now is not fair. It's not fair from a representation point of view, because we only have the 6 compared to the Mississauga numbers and the Caledon numbers. So I don't have a problem initiating this discussion again, but I think we need to have some ideas on how to achieve, and possibly this committee that we have set up could come up with some ideas on how we can move forward and how to get more representation at the region. And you know, of course, you're welcome to attend. Our first meeting's coming up at the end of this month, I believe. When is it, Commissioner?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the first meeting of the Regional Representation Task Force will be February 25th.
February 25th. So I think this is where a good discussion is going to be held, and you know, we have to. I really believe that we have to do something, because, Madam Mayor, I don't want to be put in a situation if I'm back next term, and we have to go through that same scenario where, you know, we have to choose one of the group here to give them a nice bonus and sit on at the regional table in the way we did in the past. I don't think that's a proper way of doing it, and there has to be a mechanism in place where we don't have to decide whether it's the councillor who has the most votes, or the councillor who has the most residents, or whatever it is. There has to be something in place where it will determine who will get that seat, because I don't want to go through that again. It's been 2 years since my friend here, I've always considered John Hutton my friend. It's been 2 years that you know, I've been feeling very uncomfortable sitting here of the situation I was put in 2 years ago, and what transpired. So I don't want to go through that again. I think it was really not fair that what happened, and they put a lot of pressure on both myself and Councillor Hutton, and I don't believe anybody should have to go through that again. So you know, we have to really make this work, and we have to come up with a good solution, because the way it is now it's not acceptable.
So if I could just interject, Chair Moore, the purpose was not to revisit the entire subject. That's why the Premier, with his, at the provincial level, retained, for an undisclosed amount, a professional mediator. So all of these scenarios have been looked at: Calvin size, population size, Brampton size. The mediator created a professional result. It then, without any consultation, Bill 186 just overrode it and created a scenario that doesn't fit and caused what you're talking about, amongst other things. What I'm asking is that we ask the minister to pull out Bill 186 and Justice Adams' report and enact the recommendations of Justice Adams' report. I think it's appropriate that Brampton, on behalf of the residents, when with the ministers, our minister, be tasked with getting this done. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very, very briefly, and I want to thank my colleague for his remarks. And population-wise, I know the ward he represents is large, as is the ward councillor Pleshy and I represent. We have more people than Prince Edward Island, which is 4 MPs, and 10 senators, some from away. Anyway, just very briefly, I had a conversation with Linda. I can call her Linda, I hope. I did on Saturday night. She knew she was going to be a cabinet minister, but she didn't know what position at the time, and if it might have had a complete different light on our conversation. I asked her at that time whether the drawer was open, or whether there was much consideration, or whether we could bring back the Judge Adams report. And Linda told me on Saturday night that it wasn't very high on the agenda, or on the program at that point. But again, she did not know what position or what post she was going to have in cabinet. And now, as I said, that might shine a whole different perspective on it, because now she has certainly a lot more power in that role. So I think we have open lines of communication, and can only hope that after what we went through, how many years ago was it? We all went down to Queen's Park and were ignored completely, except for Hazel, who was greeted with open arms by the Premier at the time. So, as I said before, hopefully a new Premier and a minister, cabinet minister, who with sympathy towards us, certainly, hopefully, will open the door to this happening again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Mayor Fennell. I think, and I think if what we should be doing. In fact, I think it was Councillor Miles at committee that asked that we add that number 4 there, so we could split the wards in 10, just in case we had that scenario. But I guess what we didn't do was give staff, or give the regional representation task force direction to deal with that, because it only talks about dealing with the 6. So, Madam Mayor, probably what we could do is have the clerk amend that number 3 in there to say that the regional representation task force also deal with all council members being at the region. If that would be my suggestion, Mr. Clerk. So I think you're quite right, Madam Mayor. That's probably the best thing to do.
So,
It doesn't, well, it may be part of the mandate, but it doesn't say that in number 3.
Through you, Madam Committee Chair. What's not in the minutes before you is a previous council decision that was made in December of 2012 to establish the Regional Representation Task Force. And part of that decision was that the task force be formed to develop, recommend, and implement a strategy to increase Brampton's representation at Peel Region in accordance with the terms of reference adopted through the report. And it also adopted a resolution to reaffirm council's interest and commitment to enhance the City of Brampton elected representation in the Region Appeal Council.
Great, perfect. And, Mr. Clerk, if we need to, because we've reopened this, we need to move a motion, I'd be happy to move that. So, and if we need, I guess we don't need to, you're saying we don't need to amend it, they already can deal with that? Okay, I'd be happy to move the report then, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
With that, I support wholeheartedly acting on this now. I think we've talked about it for years. Is the mayor part of the task force? And I do think that she would be the best person to carry the message, along with the support of the task force.
Through you, Madam Committee Chair, the task force appointees are Regional Councillor Pleshy, Regional Councillor Moore, City Councillor Gibson, and Regional Councillor Sprovieri. Yes. The mayor is an ex officio of all task forces and committees established by council.
Okay, so, yeah, I do think it's, Madam Mayor, that's an excellent point that you've raised, and we should get on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Callahan.
Yes, well, considering the clock is ticking and there's only about 1 year and 3/4 left, it's not going to happen this year unless there's some magic produced. In addition to that, I would tell you that I was at the convention, and sitting in the now Premier's box was Mayor McCallion. So I think you'd have to come up with some magic solution, I guess, to pave the way for this to all to happen. If in fact it didn't happen, but it was going to look like it was going to happen, how do the people who are running for office know what to run for? You know, what position they're running for? Be entirely different, or could be. Or do you let the election go the way it normally goes and then just appoint a number of regional councillors as granted to us, if they are granted to us? But I have some very severe doubts that we're going to get any cooperation at this point. They've got a lot more on their plate than whether Brampton has a full regional council representation. They've got a debt that's massive, and they're going to be concentrating on that, I think, rather than anything we can do. But, Madam Mayor, if you can do it, if you've got the magic, please do it.
So, thank you. I'm wondering then if it's necessary to add an amendment to this, since the terms of reference for the committee do provide for us, and we've got a council resolution that says that we will continue to pursue all 10 members of council coming, plus the mayor coming to the region. So,
Well, just
would you?
What I'm looking for, let's be clear, we have some serious issues with as Councillor Callahan said, but the Minister of Municipal Affairs is instrumental in getting this legislation approved, and you have a new premier. So if this council wants, I'm asking, do you want to re-endorse your original position that all members of council go? And do you want that then communicated to the Premier and the Minister of Municipal Affairs that we would request the Justice Adams report be brought forward and enacted according to the recommendations?
I think that's what
I would never
take
take my position based on what the other municipalities were feeling or thinking. Listen, we had a strong position, the public had a strong position, you had a strong position, so I'm bringing this opportunity to you. If you would like to pursue it, re-endorse it, and we'll take the steps, and at least we give the minister a chance to hear from their own residents about what they believed in. It's very tough to sit in party politics and vote against your premier, and to the credit of the now minister, they did. So we know they believe in this. So I think it's incumbent on us to ask our minister to take what they believe to be true. It's not whether I can do it, it's whether they can do it.
Thank you. The answer is yes. Councillor Gibson.
So to the clerk, I'm going to assume that we could pass that motion. I think Mayor Fennell's got it written out, and pass this, and then the task force could continue on as they are, and that could still go forward. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Committee Chair, yes.
Great.
Perfect, let's do it.
Bill 186 trumped everything with record speed. There's nothing to stop the new minister from having a new bill that
Is that for me,
implements
Mr. Clerk?
Justice Adams' report.
Or do you want to deal that with? Okay. Okay. Well. Be a separate motion, because you can't amend the public committee. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. On this matter, there's an amendment to the recommendation that it would probably be better that the clerk read, but that the council endorse the position submitted to the province.
Sorry, I'm writing up the song.
That all
Brampton councilors
Brampton councilors.
are represented at the Region Appeal.
I'm
I'm
not
trying to help
sure
you
it
because
is.
of the writing. Sorry.
It's like
Yes.
written on a
The
napkin.
council re-endorsed their position that to the province of Ontario, that all Brampton councillors sit as Region Appeal councillors, and that the Justice Adams report be brought forward to enact the recommendations therein, and then the mayor be requested to write to the minister to bring forward that report, which was unanimously supported by Brampton Council, and request the province to act on the report recommendations.
All right, all those in favor of that, Councillor Sprovieri. Councillor Sprovieri,
Well, thank you, Madam.
on the amendment.
Yes. You know, and I just spoke to it, my feeling is that unless we come up with something really different than last time, that makes some good sense, we're gonna end up exactly where we ended up last time. I don't believe that the province, I don't believe that Mississauga is gonna go for it. I believe that Linda Jeffrey is gonna all of a sudden make it happen. I believe that last time Linda, she went against the premier because of this council's pressure that we applied on her, that we wanted her to support us, and I think she was a good member, and she went against the premier just to support this group. But if we want to go with this again, Madam Mayor, I can guarantee you, I'll bet my bottom dollar that we're going to end up exactly the same as we end up last time. Maybe we'll get another seat or two out of this, which will be fine, but I don't think it's going to, what you're asking for is it's going to happen. And, but I really believe that this should be given some really serious thought by the committee before we pass on this resolution, and let's have some, at the committee level, let's have a discussion to see whether this is realistic and whether it can be achieved, because I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Are you in favor of trying, Councillor Sprovier? We'll give you an opportunity. Councillor Gibson has requested a recorded vote on the amendment as read by the mayor.
Yeah?
All those in favor of the amendment?
Showing in favor of the amendment is Councillor Miles, Councillor Chair Moore, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Paleshi, Mayor Fennell, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Callahan. All opposed, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed to the motion is Councillor Sprovieri. Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
the
The
motion
motion has
carries.
been amended. The mayor will call the vote on the main motion as
As part of
amended
the
when I
committee
turn
minutes.
back the committee minutes and recommendations to her. I have a quick question with council's indulgence on the item 045 related to 443 Center Street. And it's a question through to the either the CAO or Commissioner of Planning, and it's very simple. It's more of a request for you to clarify the role of council with respect to the chief building official for the city and the relationship that we have with authority. We've received a number of calls, and many members of the public believe that as members of council, we can override or overrule or influence the decision of the chief building official. And I think it's important for the public record to state our authority with respect to hands-off or hands-on as it relates to that. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll provide the necessary clarification. The chief building official acts under statute at arm's length from the city council and will assess the matter under the relative statutes of the Building Code Act and will make a decision. And the council has no influence and should not try to influence that decision.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Sprovieri.
Well,
Is that
I'm
from previous? Okay, Madam Mayor, I'm turning the minutes back to you for ratification.
All in favor of the, committee of council February sixth? That's carried. J2, Councillor Hutton, Brampton Environmental Planning Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You have before you the minutes of the Council, Brampton Environmental Planning Advisory Committee of December 4th, 2012. Are there any questions? Not seeing none, I pass the minutes back to you.
Thank you. All those in favor of J2 minutes of the Brampton Environmental Planning Advisory Committee? Hands up. Thank you. That's carried. There's no unfinished business. Now we move to, where are we here? Okay. Council, under Q, tenders and procurements, there are 3 Q1, Q2, and Q3. We don't put these in consent, so let me go to Q1. Q1 is the road resurfacing wards 1 through 8 and 10. It's moved by Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Callahan. Is there any questions on Q1? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just something minor on Q15. Waldercroft is Ward 1 and not Ward 2. I don't know how important that is to
Okay.
the overall report, but I think it's important to have it correct. Thank you.
Councillor Plushy, is this the one you want to speak to? All in favor of Q1? Thank you, that's carried. Q2 is the request to begin procurement with the Region Appeal for single source delivery of Bramley Road widening between Mayfield and Inspire Boulevard, Ward 9, moved by Councillor Sprovieri and Councillor Dillon. Councillor Plushy, is Q3 the one you're going to, okay, all those in favor for this one? Thank you. Council, item Q3 is request to begin procurement for the hiring of an architect to design, contract, administer, and the pre-qualification for the general contractor to complete the expansion of the Sandalwood Transit Facility. And Councillor Plushy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First of all, I'll tell you, quite frankly, I'm surprised at $1.7 million for an architect to do this. We're saying here, I believe in the report, that we're going to spend another $20 million on the expansion of the Sandalwood Transit Facility. Is that correct? And that's why, and then the basis of the contract is the $1.7 million for an architect?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's correct. The estimated construction cost, including the soft costs, is somewhere around $20.3 million.
You know, I know the facility up there. I've toured the facility up there, and it's a fairly large facility. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that in order to, I guess I've had this difficulty. I've had the difficulty at the region too. Every time we build a building, either be regional or city, everything starts afresh. It's like a brand new, we've never done it before. You know, and I look at what you're looking to build here, and mainly, I guess, is a storage facility for more buses at the Sandalwood Parkway. First of all, I can't believe that well, you know what? Okay, it cost $20 million to build this. So be it. But I can't believe that we can't come up with, in our vast experience here at the city, that we don't have the expertise to do up the contract. And we don't have the expertise to procure a contractor, that we rely on an architect and we pay him up to $1.7 million, and that to go out and administer and pre-qualify of a general contractor phase of the project. And I'm thinking, do we not have the people here that can pre-qualify? Do we not know who the general contractors could be that would be capable of doing this building and the size of it? It's not it's not I guess, a building of great architecture. It's not a building or anything like that. It's a storage facility. And that for buses, it's got to be a fairly standard contract. And I don't know how we can justify, or I don't know how I can justify $1.7 million to have this guy go out and do it, that I think most of our staff could probably do a majority of it. I understand you need an architect to design and do the thing, but I don't understand how you need an architect to administer the contract and pre-qualification of a general contractor. And I'd like to know what the cost of that $1.7 million is. Have they broken it down, what that $1.7 million, how it breaks down?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I'll try to answer your questions because you've asked a number of them. The new design will be for an expansion in the order of magnitude of 100,000 to 130,000 square feet, and that will house about 192 new buses.
Okay, Julian, sorry, and I don't
No,
want
it's
to
okay.
interrupt it. Let me talk about that one piece there.
Yes, sir.
What is the size of the storage facility that we have there now to house buses? It says here 263,000 square feet that's there now?
That's correct, Councillor, but as you know, there's many other program elements to that building.
Yes.
The existing building deals with approximately 128 buses. The new expansion will deal with 192 buses. So there's many other components and program elements to that existing building.
Right. So well, and I guess this comes to my point. You've got a building now there that houses 120 some odd buses. You're going to a building that, is it going to be an additional 192 buses? And if it is it not going to be the same type of square part where the buses are stored now versus the new building going to be basically the same design where the buses are going to be stored? Not counting the additional that you say you have there. You have offices there, and that you have I think you have a bus wash there and all that stuff, so you're not going to be building a new one of those. So what you're building is basically a warehouse, the same as the warehouse you have now, and it's going to be a little bit bigger because it's going to hold 192 buses. It's a square block building.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll let Commissioner Stoltz speak to some of those new program elements, but going back to one of the earlier questions, the architect, the architectural consultant is our representative for the project. So the way the hierarchy is established with the architect and the GC on the project, we rely on that architect to be our representative through the contract administration. So all elements of coordination, all elements of change orders, if there are any disputes, any change directions that need to be truthed out, any approvals, it's quite, while the building itself is not a complicated structure, the role that we're expecting the architectural consultant to do is fairly complex. So from my understanding, the design and contract administration fee is in line with market percentages. Certainly we'll go back and have a look at it, but from what I understand from my folks, it's consistent with the market.
Yeah, I guess to me, it just doesn't seem right that, and I understand that, because I'll tell you in the end, and we've had this dispute at the region sometimes, when it comes down to the end and there's a dispute, the architect walks away. Especially with change orders, and these issues that are coming through. Half the time it's the architect's fault. The contractor gets in there and says, well, I can't do what you're asking me to do, so we have to do a change order. So there's nothing that falls back on the architect that says, well, you know what, you're the one that originally designed this, so you should pay a penalty to the architect. They never pay a penalty. And that, because they're our guy. And that's flat out, as far as I'm concerned, wrong to spend that much money on a guy on the type of building that you're building. And I don't know why, and I understand where you're coming from. I just, fundamentally, it's against my belief that we have to, when we have people here and we build lots of buildings, that we actually have to pay that much to a guy to go in, Absolutely, that's the norm out there, because they're the ones that set the market. And that they all sit there and price it out, and it's a standard price that they pay. So it's easy to say that's what the market's paying, but you know what? Hell, it's not right. It absolutely isn't to pay that much money. I'd love for you guys to come forward and say, you know what, I think we can do this, you know?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, certainly our staff is involved, they're very involved through the process. I see Commissioner Lewis looking over at me. I know that we have strengthened our procurement documents, and we have made the requirements for the architectural consultants and the GCs to be much more rigorous. And I think some of those concerns that you've raised from the past, you'll see that we've addressed a lot of those items.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. At page Q3-3, starts out with construction of the expansion to Sandalwood Transit Facility will require detailed programming, et cetera, et cetera. What is the detailed programming? How does this differ from any one of the other ones we've built? I thought it was cookie cutter, in fact.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I believe, sir, that it's simply referring to the normal process we follow, defining the program requirements, doing schematic design, and then doing the more detailed design work, whatever that may be. So it's referring to the process.
But we have done a couple others, have we?
Yes, sir.
Similar to this, so picking up Councillor Palaszczuk's argument, are we prohibited by law from using an architect's design on the new transit terminal? Can we use his design?
No, sir, we can't.
So in other words, every time you hire an architect and he puts together a design, it's his, and you can't use it at all. You have to go and pay for it again. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through you, Madam Mayor, unless those terms have been previously negotiated with the former architect.
Oh, well, maybe we should make it a policy that we, in future, suggest that as being put into a contract, because I'm with Paul. I think if you know how to do it or it's been done already, why are we spending $1.7 million simply for this guy to look over our shoulder? The other thing, this reminds me of the $2 million bathroom that was going to be erected in Chinguacousy Park, which I took issue with, and as far as I know, that the bathroom is still not yet. I'd have to ask Jamie, but I don't think it's ever been built, has it? It was built? Did it cost $2 million?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it was roughly $1 million, and I think about $400,000 of that was site servicing costs.
Okay, so I remember the original proposal was about $1 million.
For the architectural consultant.
All right. Well, I share with Paul the concern I have about that kind of money, but if the architects have got their own little protection and I guess their own little field of dreams. Thank you.
I agree with Councillor Palaszczuk's observations. Sometimes these numbers seem quite outrageous, but I went on the board to respond to the $2 million washroom comment. I think the case there was maybe we could have described the contract differently. It's a community service building with meeting rooms, paddle boat docks, servicing, and within it there are washrooms on that side of the park. So at the time it was unfairly characterized, but it has been open and well used throughout the last several months, all last summer. It's quite popular and used for many programs for kids and families, and it's an entire recreation building. It would be like saying, let's build a washroom and attached to it is the entire tennis bubble. So we need to be careful how we capture things in the media, because the public wonders why we'd be doing that, but that's not what we did. So I just wanted to make that clear, and compliments to that phenomenal building that's fully accessible, down to the paddle boats, the docks, the modern docks, and the community meeting rooms. And I've been there many occasions. It's well used, and people comment how nice it is. Are there washrooms in that building? Yes, there are. So it's been a well-used, increased facility to the Jacuzzi Park profile. Council, all those in favor of Q3? Thank you, that's carried. Council, we're now at the area of the agenda entitled Public Question Period. If there's any person here who wishes to ask a question about any matter on today's agenda, this would be a time to step forward and ask your question. We will do our best to answer the question or to refer it for an answer if we can't have that today. Welcome, Mr. Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Please record Mr. Johnson has come forward with a question. Thank you.
Consul, CAO, senior staff. I've been before you a number of times, and I'm frankly confused myself. I don't know whether I was before you as an advocate, whether I was before you as a delegate, or whether I was before you during question period. But I've been before you, and I've made it very, very obvious right from the start of the genuine interest I have with realignment of regional council. I've been verbal, I put it in writing. I know the clerk and the deputy clerk are fully aware. The question was asked, what about public participation? And the answer came back that the public should be involved on these committees. The day it was introduced, and Councillor Spoberry spoke up and asked to be added to the list. I hadn't read the report. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was coming forward. So after I spoke to the clerk and I said, I have a genuine interest. My question is, are you going to involve the public? If you're going to involve the public, are the public welcome to be part of this regional task force committee? And if the answer to that is yes, how do I apply?
Well, I will ask those on the committee about the formation and participation of the public on the regional committee. As it relates to the position to the minister, I encourage the public to contact the minister. Those who were involved before, it was quite a unanimous position of this city to call upon the minister to implement her position, well-recorded position, now that she's in a position to do so, and I encourage the public to speak up. Did someone want to respond to how the regional? Oh, the first meeting of the Regional Representation Committee is on Monday, February 25 at the Region Appeal Building. All meetings are open to the public. Oh, it's here? Oh,
Okay,
Mr. Simmons, could you please explain, because all our meetings are open to the public, and if there are public who wish to attend and
Certainly, thank you,
participate.
Madam Mayor. Just for council's information and to the guest, the first meeting of the Regional Representation Task Force is February 25th. One of the first tasks or requests of that committee will be to discuss how they wish to go about soliciting interest from the public to participate on that task force, which is in fact built into the terms of reference of that body. So there are absolutely members of the public on that task force, and the process through which will be discussed at that first meeting.
Okay, did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, we now move to, Mr. Clerk. We now move to bylaws, Mr. Hutton. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gibson that bylaws 25-2013 to 35-2013 before council at its meeting of February 13th, 2013, be given the required number of readings taken by the mayor, the city clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto.
All those in favor of the bylaws as read, hands up. Thank you. That's carried. Council, we have the confirming bylaw moved by Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Hutton. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Council, we do have a motion to adjourn. Just to remind everyone, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so we wish everybody a very heartfelt special day with their special person. on Valentine's Day. And yes, tomorrow is Mayor McCallion's 91st, I think, birthday. We'll be at the Region of Peel. It's 92. I thought it was 92 after the election. 92. I have to go back through my pictures of the cake cuttings over the years, so I'm sure if there will be a surprise cake at the region, so if there is that, I'm sure everyone's welcome to join us at midday to celebrate with Mayor McCallion. We now have a motion. It's also Family Day, Council, before the next council meeting, so we encourage everyone and thank our staff, who, of course, all the staff, the appropriate staff who work on Family Day, providing family opportunities at our many recreation centers and facilities, that they do such a wonderful job. So it's moved for adjournment. Councillor Moore, Councillor Sanderson, all those in favor? Thank you, that's carried.
The only day the fire chief comes.